Okay, we're ready to go. Go ahead, Sue.
Okay. Good afternoon, ASDB community. It is 4 p.m. and I call this meeting of the board to order. Brittany, would you please call roll?
Absolutely. Sue K. Kneifel.
Present.
I'm present. Linda Bove.
Present.
Colette Chapman.
Present.
Lynn Davison.
Present.
Michael Gordon. Katie Cinco.
Present.
And Earl Terry.
Present.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 1.02. I'd like to introduce our new board member, Earl Terry. I'm going to give you a little bit of his history and his bio. Earl Terry, his pronouns are he, his, and him, is an Afro-American deaf, blind, deaf, disabled, and queer entrepreneur and instructor based in Phoenix, Arizona on the Akimel, O'odham, Upper Pima, Hohokam, and O'odham land. With over 9 years of experience, Earl specializes in teaching American Sign Language and is passionate about promoting awareness and inclusivity for the deaf, deaf-blind, deaf-disabled, hard of hearing, and late deafened communities. As an entrepreneur, Earl curates art exhibitions, offers consultation services on ASL, Black ASL, and ProTactile, develops educational materials, and conducts community-based workshops. He is dedicated to celebrating the diversity of the deaf, deaf-blind, deaf-disabled, hard of hearing, and late deafened communities, and empowering individuals through education and artistic expression. Earl is deeply engaged in the BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, arts communities, curating exhibitions that amplify marginalized voices and showcase the unique contributions of Black deaf artists. With a master's degree in sign language education and a bachelor's degree in communication studies and journalism, Earl combines academic expertise with practical experience to deliver impactful ASL instruction and advocacy. Inspired by Maya Angelou's words, Earl believes in the power of self-realization and resilience. Stand up straight and realize who you are, that you tower over your circumstance. Through his work, Earl strives to uplift and empower others to embrace their identities and communicate effectively with the community. I'd like to offer a welcome to Mr. Terry, and I'd like to give him a chance to add anything if he'd like at this point.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome and introduction. I want to add that I graduated from PDSD in 1998. I have a deaf brother who graduated from here as well in 2001. So we are alumni, and it's wonderful to be back. And Katie is saying, welcome home, Earl.
All right, moving on to agenda item 1.03, call to the public for agendized items.
We have two calls to the public. One is present. We'll call up Elizabeth. I'm sorry, I'm going to probably not pronounce this correctly. Browse.
That's correct. Hello, thank you for the time today. My name is Libby Browse, and I'm a preschool teacher at PDSD and the vice president of the ASDB Educators Association. I'm commenting today on behalf of ASDB EA. ASDB has operating principles and working agreements known as ACT, accountability, collaboration, transparency, and those I'll be talking about in my comment. ASDB Educators Association would like to share our concerns over the recent decision to create a new position in the agency, Deputy Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction. We would like to make clear our concern is with the process to create this position and the communication about the decision. On April 26th, the agency received an email from Superintendent Reichman with an update of the search for the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction. Superintendent Reichman stated, after the second round of interviews, none of the candidates were offered a position. These interviewees, while highly qualified, did not have their senior management leadership experience. She went on to say that the current leadership structure at ASDB educational programs would be evaluated and formal professional development for current leaders would be explored. On May 3rd, 1 week, and I emphasize 1 week, after that update, the agency received a follow-up email from Superintendent Reichman. In that email, Superintendent Reichman identified that ASDB senior leaders evaluated the educational programs and additional leadership growth opportunities for our current leaders. In the same email, the agency was informed that based on that analysis, the position of Deputy Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction would be created, and the position was already offered to one of the candidates from the Assistant Superintendent search. After 1 week's time, a new position in the agency was not only created, but also filled. This led many staff members and members of ASDB-EA to pause with questions. This hasty decision certainly did not meet the standard of ACT and unfortunately has followed the inconsistent pattern in the agency of leadership positions being created without first being posted internally or externally. On May 6th and 7th, ASDB-EA emailed Superintendent Reichman with follow-up questions that were not addressed in her original email. The questions were about the job description, budget, and posting of the Deputy Assistant Superintendent position. On May 8th, Superintendent Reichman responded to ASDB-EA leadership with answers to all 3 questions, though no additional information has been shared agency-wide. As members of ASDB-EA continue to engage in conversations with our colleagues, it is apparent that there are more unanswered questions and growing frustration around not only the lack of accountability, collaboration, and transparency, but the leadership-heavy structure our agency has found itself in. Staff have identified contradictions in theory of developing leaders from within and practice of filling leadership positions from outside the agency. Tension among staff is growing due to being left out of decisions and watching our agency leadership swiftly make decisions on items they deem priority without first gathering necessary feedback from key stakeholders like staff. The ASDB Educators Association is here again to ask that the board meet with us to discuss establishing an H policy so that the staff can meaningfully be engaged in such high-stakes decisions on leadership. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have one more public comment on agenda items. This came as an email. I'll ask first if Mr. Richard McLaughlin Jr. is present and he can speak. All right, I'll read his email. In his email, he says, "My name is Richard A. McLaughlin Jr. I'm a former student at Phoenix Day School for the Deaf. I am really excited and looking forward to see PDSD's master facility plan. Since I watched the board's study session about the master facility plan on YouTube and on PDSD, I feel that I recommend to have second options to look at new lands to expand the campus due to increase in students' enrollment, and I feel that it needs to have more classroom and needs to hire more teachers to meet students' ratio needs. Also needs to have a dorm on the campus due to students who reside in far East Valley and far West Valley, so they can stay on campus and have students' energy to continue to learning. Several students had talked about waking up at 5:30 a.m. to get on the bus between 6:30 a.m. to 7 a.m., and they arrive home approximately 5 to 6 p.m., or those involved in sports get home at like 6:30 to 8 p.m. and not have enough time or hours of sleep when completing their homework, and some students take a nap on the bus in the morning. I think it will be nice to have students to stay in a dorm on PDSD campus if find a new land. Thank you for your consideration and hope you can look at it on second options for PDSD's master facility plan.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 1.04, the superintendent's report. Superintendent Reichman.
Thank you. Good afternoon, President Kneifel, members of the ASDB Board of Directors, Acting Assistant Superintendent Ketchoff, Assistant Superintendent Cooper, members of the ASDB community. Welcome to the May 9th board meeting here in Phoenix. Someone recently shared with me a quote. Or excuse me, shared with me, it is we are in the 100th day of May. That expression, 100 days of May, is interesting. And we all know what that feels like. We're very busy, and we're getting near the end of the school year. We are preparing for graduations, and we are all overwhelmed with so much to do before the end of the school year. I have to confess, my favorite time of the school year is graduation season. And we have two. One graduation for the Tucson campus will be held Monday, May 20th at 4 o'clock. And the second graduation will be here Tuesday, May 21st at 5:30. I hope all of the board members are able to attend both of our graduations. And we are cordially inviting you to please attend. You all remember at the last board meeting, I shared a quote from an ancient Greek engineer named Archimedes. And that engineer discovered the concept of using levers. And he said, "Give me a place to stand, and I can move the world." And I would like to go back and discuss that quote and that discussion about stability here at ASDB. We know that organizations that are stable have certain qualities for their staff. And staff feel things are predictable, they are continual, they are reliable, and there is a sense of security. And that sense of security correlates to stability. So that sense of stability is critical to the organizational culture and for our leaders to provide that sense of stability. Then that allows the organization to grow and plan for the future. And we know this. We also know that ASDB has a pretty good foundation. We have pretty good stability. Of course, we could improve, but we already have our core values and beliefs. We have our mission, the focus on excellence and innovation, And as was just mentioned, our operating principles, ACT, accountability, collaboration, and transparency, as well as the strategic plan the board has given us to guide us into the future. I would like to add 2 more things that we are working on to have clear, transparent communication. We are working on improving that and really soliciting feedback, meaning for important decisions. And we are continuing to improve in that. So ASDB is really working towards the goal to become more stable as an organization. So I'd like to give 2 examples of how, as a stable organization, we can better stand on our foundation and address the challenges that are facing us all over. So you all might have heard recently, the state of Arizona has a budget shortfall. We did receive a letter April 19th following a memo. So we received 2, first a letter April 19th and then a follow-up memo April 24th. And those 2 pieces of correspondence said, for the next 2 years, we have to save $1.2 billion. And again, I will say you heard that correctly. That was $1.2 billion with a B. So that means all state agencies are faced with having to reevaluate how our budgets could be reduced. We don't know yet the budget for the next fiscal year, but we do already have several directives from the governor's office. So I would like to briefly mention those for you. And then later, Assistant Superintendent Cooper will provide more explanation. First is we have a head count cap. And so what do they mean by head count cap? The head count is the number of staff we have, full-time and part-time. So all of the staff within the agency. Every agency has a head count cap. Our agency head count cap is 864. So when we talk about head count, we're not talking about FTE or full-time equivalent. That is not what we are talking about. Rather, each person who works with the agency. So one IA, instructional assistant, might be full-time at 40 hours a week, whereas another might have 5 hours a week. And that is considered 2 for our head count. So currently, we have 724 staff. We have 23 contractors, and those are included within our head count. And most of our contractors are through ACRO, mostly nursing staff. The remaining positions are 117 vacancies. So fortunately, that gives us some wiggle room so that we are able to continue hiring for our teachers, professional staff, IAs, bus drivers, etc. It's not as much flexibility as we had before, but it is still sufficient for us to be able to continue to operate. So that is the good news. So that's the first thing. Second is compensation. We have a compensation cap. We are not allowed to have any more compensation increases. But at the same time, the governor's office is allowing for current increases that we have already committed to and communicated to our staff. So that means that you have on the board agenda today pay increases that you can and are permitted to approve because we have already committed and communicated with staff prior to the April 19th letter. That was the cutoff date. So we can follow and keep those commitments that you see in board docs for this afternoon. That also means from here on out, any other increases are not permitted. Third, we have our budget. There are possible reductions that need to be made. We do not know yet for sure. We have not received our budget from the state as of yet. So July 1st, 2024 until June 2025, June 30th, that is our budget year. And we have not received the information of how much we will be receiving from the state. When we know that information, we will share it. So we are not aware right now. But that does not mean that we are sitting on our hands and waiting. We are already in the midst of discussions, reviewing our budget, and trying to figure out how we can find, or where we can find that savings within our budget. And we have a pretty good idea, and we know it will evolve as time goes on. So that is one example of why it is important to have a stable organization, so we are able to address challenging situations such as this. The second example is our leadership team. As the person who provided the public comments said, looking at our leadership team, we are trying to figure out what to do moving into the future. As you know, we did a nationwide recruitment effort to replace Assistant Superintendent Ketchov, and we had a partnership with NAV, and that partnership was successful. They brought us 24 candidates. We selected the top 5. We went through a series of interviews, and it happened at the end of the interview process. None of those 5 candidates were selected for the assistant superintendent position. So that meant that we had to quickly figure out what to do. The first decision was asking acting assistant superintendent Ketchov if he would be willing to stay on in that position for an additional year. And fortunately, he did agree. So his contract for the next year is on the agenda for your approval tonight. The second decision we made was to look at the educational program and figure out how we could reorganize the education program to strengthen the stability and to improve the stability for the future. The third decision we made was, again, to look at professional development. How can we provide professional development to our current leadership and give them the experiential opportunities so that they do have the skills to move into upper administration positions? So we are committed to doing that. We haven't figured out the specifics of what it looks like, but we are committed to the concept. And then the fourth decision was the decision to offer a different position to Miss De La Cruz. Because out of the 5 candidates, she scored the highest. So I wanted to give her the same opportunities to learn and to grow and to bring her here. And with her colleagues, have professional development opportunities to grow their experience and develop their skills to move up into senior management positions. So that decision, we now have our Deputy Assistant Superintendent position that is up for approval on the agenda tonight for your discussion and approval. So we have that. That is another example of planning for the future. One more example I wanted to briefly mention is the Master Facilities Plan. You had the board work study session just last week, Thursday, and you all had the opportunity to review the conceptual designs for the Tucson campus and the Phoenix campus. And this is really planning for the future. We are looking at and figuring out how we can provide the best facilities that meet the students' needs now in the 21st century. Our buildings here are aging. Tucson campus is even older than the PDSD campus. So we have to have a master facilities plan. I am hoping that you took the time to look over the materials that Albert Duff, the Director of Operations, has provided to you. You did have time to ask questions if you had any. And this afternoon, we will vote on a conceptual design. So if you vote on that, that will give us permission to move forward and finalize our master facilities plan. And you might be thinking, where's the money going to come from? That is a huge question we are facing, and we don't know right now. But that doesn't mean that we stop planning. We have to have a master facilities plan, and then we can use that to figure out who is going to be networking, reaching out to the governor's office, the state legislature, and figuring out future financial opportunities to fund and really give our students the future for both campuses. So to wrap up, I'd like to go back to the point that of the importance of stability here at ASDB. And I think both of our assistant superintendents will discuss that more as well. But I have been working with you all for 8 years, and I really appreciate your support and how you cherish ASDB. It is obvious that you care about us very much. So with that, I am open for any questions you may have.
Does anyone have any questions? I do. I was going to be kind and let these guys start. I have 3 that I kind of want to start from the last thing you said and move backwards a little bit. So in establishing the Deputy Assistant Superintendent position, I would assume that after, let's say it this way, if the agreement passes today to have Assistant Superintendent Ketchoff continue for an additional year, I would assume that after that year extension, the Assistant Superintendent position would then repost.
That is correct.
My second question to that is, will the will the Deputy Assistant Superintendent position remain in place?
We don't know at this time.
Okay, thank you. Moving back a little bit, as being involved in a state agency myself and having to go through the governor's reduction exercise, I know that we were given numbers to work with. I'm wondering, and I don't know if Annette can answer this or Shayna can answer this, since we do operate as an LEA, are other LEAs faced with the same reduction exercise?
No.
That lends to my next question. Is there a possibility to approach the legislatures with that in mind and request some kind of waiver or exemption to this reduction exercise, since we are operating as an LEA per legislative directive?
We have completed the reduction exercise. Really, that was a proposed reduction. But nothing has been given back to us about specific commitments or reductions. When that does happen, then that would be the time where we would go to the governor's office and request an exemption from the budget reduction. But we haven't heard anything yet. I think it is a little premature to ask for that right now, unless you all have different thoughts on that.
In my very humble opinion, I think it would be good to have something prepared and ready to go. We, as you know, working for a state agency, we are working with the premise that those reductions are going to be enforced. And I think that we would be better served if we tried to have something in place sooner than later, and maybe try to rally some allies on the legislative floor, that if this would need to have that kind of support. Just my 2 cents.
It's okay, I don't mean to interrupt. Could you share what
That is good feedback. Thank you.
reduction exercise?
So what Annette was speaking to earlier, we were given the task of reducing our budget based on the funding mechanisms as a state agency, the funding mechanisms that we receive our revenues. Some agencies have other funds, which might be from taxation, and some agencies have general funds that are appropriated from the legislature. Some agencies have both. If they have other funds, they were asked to do a 2% reduction for their fiscal year 25 budget, which is the one we proposed last year that has not yet been approved, plus project that 2% reduction for the next 2 budget years. If you receive general funds, it was 4% for the 25 year and 2% for the next 2 years. If you receive both of those funds, it's both of those things combined. ASDB receives both of those funds. And that's a significant amount of money that could, help continue to operate the school, not a regular state agency, So that's why I'm saying I think it would behoove ASDB as an LEA to be prepared to, have to go to bat and request some type of an exemption or a lesser reduction amount in comparison to other state agencies, because that was kind of made with a broad swoop of the pen, and ASDB does not operate the same as other state agencies, and I think we need to be reminding the legislators and the governor's office of that.
So just to, I guess, in a more easier to understand way, we were asked as a state agency alone to put on paper where we think we could cut.
Correct.
By certain percents based on our funding input.
Correct.
And we have submitted that.
Yes.
And that could possibly be exactly what the governor's office does.
That could be, and I'm speaking as a state agency and as a representative of the board. As a state agency, we submitted our budget proposal last year,
Yes.
September 1st. And then we were asked to do this exercise, this reduction exercise, and I believe that was due April 24th-ish.
Yes. However, ASDB was not originally included in that statewide communication. It was about a week and a half later.
Okay. That's even more interesting to me. So then we submitted what that could possibly look like from the budget submission from last year. We are working from I would guess ASDB is as well, working from the premise that this is going to go through.
Yes.
Because we have a shortfall that is going to impact the state, and that money needs to be recouped in some way. So therefore, again, seeing that other LEAs do not participate in this exercise, I think it would be wise for us as an LEA to reach out and try to advocate for ASDB to be exempt from this exercise.
This is Linda. If I may, I have a question. Thank you. It's hard to get your attention from over here in the corner. So I have a question for you, Sue Kay. You're discussing the possibility of asking for an exemption. Is there some language that we can use to ask for an exemption, or what? I would like to clarify exactly what we would be asking for. So when you say exemption because we're an LEA, are there other agencies that are also LEAs? Are we the only one? So I guess my question is for clarification purposes.
And that's a very good question, Linda. So because of statute, we now operate as an LEA. And other LEAs within the state are not required to do this reduction exercise for their budget. I think it would be prudent for us as ASDB to request the same treatment as an LEA and not have to go through this budget. Which now, is there a method or a mechanism for that? Shana might have more information on that than I do.
I do want to add in discussions with our OSPB analyst, I did mention a lot of what you're already discussing as it pertains to us being an LEA. He did indicate to me that there have not yet been processes put in place for an agency to request for an exemption. And I did let him know at that time we would be more than ready to go ahead and request for that exemption.
Okay, awesome. I just think we need to be, thinking ahead and not just in the moment as it relates to the budget in this regard, because knowing what we're reducing as a state agency that I work for currently, and the funds that ASDB gets sitting, being on the finance committee, that's a significant amount that would impact the students and the day-to-day operations of providing academics to students across the state. that was my questions. Does anybody else have anything else regarding the superintendent's report? All right. Moving on to 1.05, Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction report, Interim Assistant Superintendent Katchoff.
Good afternoon, Board President Kneifel, members of the board, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendent Cooper, and the ASDB community. Almost a year ago in July, when I gave my board report, I mentioned that I'm a huge Arizona Cardinal fan. And similar to football, I always look at each school year kind of like a new season. That means sometimes players that were on the team previously stick around. Sometimes you lose good players and you get upset. And sometimes you add great players and it makes the team that much better. Back in July, almost a year ago, I was excited to introduce many new additions to the ASDB leadership team. People like CTE Director Scott Matson, Region 3 Director Greer Martin Parrish, Tucson Principal Paul Sanders, ODD Director Michael Olivier, SPED Director Sarah Satilli, as well as a handful of new assistant principals, Karen Tallis, Sabre Taylor, and Melissa Brown. Going into this year, that was a substantial amount of new leaders entering into new positions. I am very proud in all of them of how they've grown throughout the year. And as of today, none have given an indication that they're leaving, and they'll all be returning next year. I know we still have a few months left and anything can happen, but I do want to thank them all for their dedication and desire to stay with the ASDB team. It's always easier to move forward and grow when many of the pieces don't change year after year. As I wrap up a year in this position, I want to go back to something I said at the May board meeting, May 2023. I concluded that by saying here's the quote, "We spend a lot of time at these board meetings discussing the campuses, but we can't forget the early learning program and the itinerant programs. The largest number of our students that we contact are within those two programs." A year later, I feel like I need to reiterate that again, as a lot of my time this year has been spent on the campuses. No matter if our campuses have 2 kids or 2,000 kids, no matter if they have veteran principals or new principals, by design, that's where the majority of the federal reporting, state reporting, IDEA, IEPs, that's where a lot of that emphasis is, and they will always be taking a lot of attention. As I look forward to next year, I'm looking forward to working closer with Dr. Benedict and the ALP, as well as the itinerant directors, Jason Lilly, Greer Parrish, and Rosie Hicks, to continue to learn more about their amazing programs within the agency, which truly touch the entire state of Arizona. In conclusion, I want to give one of my favorite quotes from a famous American business theorist named Edward Deming. And that quote is, "Every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets." So again, every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets. As we wrap up this year, or this season, and as we reflect on our wins and losses throughout the year, I do hope that all of us, the teachers, staff, leaders, and the board, can continue to look at ASDB, look at the strategic plan, look at the master facility plan, and work together to continue to build systems that are designed to get the best outcomes possible for this agency. You all have a copy of my report. If there's any questions, please let me know.
Any questions? Okay. Moving on. Agenda item 1.06, Assistant Superintendent of Agency Operations and Support Services Report, Assistant Superintendent Cooper.
Good afternoon, Board President Kneifel, Superintendent Reichman, Acting Assistant Superintendent Katchoff, members of the board, ASDB community, and staff members. As we find ourselves welcoming May and then June, we stand on the verge of closing out yet another fiscal year. With approximately 6 to 7 weeks remaining, the operations and support services team has been very busy supporting each of the educational programs as they close out the academic year. The various activities, initiatives, and projects that each of them have been working on have been included in the departmental reports, but I do want to mention at a higher level that includes finalizing the transition of our new student information system, working on filling staff vacancies, assisting with the coordination of the graduation so that we can celebrate our graduating classes of 2024, collaborating on the implementation of a new complaints system portal, and monitoring our agency budget. Also included as a separate agenda item under 5.02 is the work our Director of Operations has been spearheading, which is the development and completion of the Master Facilities Plan. These last 2 months are months of transition where we're shifting from one year to the next and focus on how we can better provide the support and resources necessary to both serve our students and our staff within this next year. As some of what we've already been discussing, with that said, some of the most difficult challenges continuing to face us is that we're striving to provide that highest quality education for our students, but that means we're having to manage our resources at the same time. That includes our facilities, our staff, the technology, as well as the finances. To help navigate the state's projected deficit of about the $1.2 billion, which became effective April 27th, the governor's office instituted the statewide headcount cap, provided the compensation and measures for all executive agencies, boards, and commissions. What the governor's office indicated is that the headcount is not necessarily a freeze, the cap, but it's a cap on the number of positions, as Superintendent Reichman mentioned, in the agency. And what that means is we can refill our positions if they become vacant, and if there are any vacant positions that no longer need to be filled, we can reallocate those positions if there is a need for a new position within the agency. The headcount cap includes all full-time, part-time, and contracted staff, which, as we've already mentioned, include our contracted vendors for primarily ACRA, which would be our one-to-one nurses, both with helping with supporting our FBC preschool contract, as well as our one-to-one nurses here on the Phoenix campus. And as already mentioned, for ASDB, that headcount cap was originally identified to be 747 originally. And what that meant was that included our only filled positions and the 23 contractors that we had. We sought clarification as we had a number of positions, as you all are aware, 117 vacancies. And Superintendent Reichman was able to work and request that we be able to add those vacancies to our headcount cap. To ensure that we stay within the 864 headcount cap limit, we'll be analyzing every vacancy before requesting approval to recruit and refill the position, and we will also be requiring more specific justification when asked to add a new position. As it relates to the compensation administration measures, which became effective April 27th, the governor's office also indicated that any staff increases to their base pay will be put on pause unless it was already communicated and approved on or before April 19th. These actions included in-grade adjustments, individual merit increases, and agency merit increase programs. As Superintendent Reichman mentioned, for ASDB, based on our understanding, the salaries for 2025 increases that were approved in our previous March 7th board meeting will not be impacted. Additionally, over the last few months, we've also publicly communicated to agency staff and made commitments to present the remaining fiscal year 2025 salary schedule adjustments, which are included are for our interpreters and related services staff. As you recall, we've had every intention to present both of the salary schedules at the March 7th board meeting. However, both groups requested that we put a hold on that as they were wanting us to reevaluate and take into consideration further feedback that they were wanting to provide, as well as requesting that we conduct a market analysis. We did just that. During the last few weeks, we've collaborated with each of the staff and have included those recommendations for their salary adjustments in today's consent agenda item 6.01. With the board's approval today, we would have achieved our goal this year of recommending and receiving approval for changes to salary schedules before teacher contracts were issued and before staff members left to enjoy their summer break. In addition to the headcount cap and implementing the compensation administration measures, each agency, as we've just talked about, was tasked with conducting a budgetary savings exercise where we were directed to present plans to trim an annualized 4% from our current fiscal year 24 general fund operations budget, of which the 2% had to be ongoing savings. For ASDB, our fiscal year 2024 general funds appropriation budget, for context, is about $26 million. So the 4% equated to identifying a little over $1 million in cuts for the remainder of the current year, with the ongoing 2% cuts being about $520,000. So roughly a total of about $1.5 million from our general fund. Our total operating appropriations budget, which includes both the general fund and our School for the Deaf and the Blind Fund, which primarily consists of our institutional vouchers and our land endowment, is about $41 million in total, which meant the 2% target cut equated to about $817,000. The budgetary savings exercise did not include proposed cuts to the $20.3 million of our special line items, which for ASDB, that would be our special line item for our school bus, our agency vehicle replacement, and our cooperative services. It also did not include the $6 million of our non-appropriated or restricted fund budgets, which would be primarily for our federal grants and the Prop 301 classroom site funds. Most of the proposed expenditure cuts the budget team initially identified included restricted purchases to only essential items, limiting in and out of state travel, and reviewing the various vacant positions primarily funded through the general fund. Positions that are critical in providing the student special education services as required in the IEPs were not included. Identifying the proposed cuts and presenting the plan to the governor's office was an exercise and not set in stone. However, it was meant to be a practice according to the suggestions that we were advised by our state agency liaisons. We have yet to receive our fiscal year 2025 budget, and if you recall, that was submitted in early September. So we do not know if any of the decision packages we requested appropriated funding for will be included in our final approved agency budget, which begins July 1st. Both spending and revenue issues need to be addressed both need to be addressed as a comprehensive long-term plan. And as we talk about sustainability, stability, and given the continued financial challenges we were already facing with the contracted vendor services for transportation, our student support staff, most of which primarily results from our recruitment challenges, the staff vacancies, and our change in LEA status with the passage of House Bill 2863. As you've heard over the last couple of years I've been here, we've already developed plans to continue with identifying ongoing cost reduction measures, implementing accountability controls, and creating operational efficiencies. Additionally, the agency's grant developer position, which was a new position we did add this year, she's been aggressively seeking new revenue sources and funding opportunities. And she's been doing an awesome job as she's been doing that. This will all help to balance our budget and ensure we have that fiscal sustainability and stability. We will be forced, however, to make choices regarding our budget situation. The sooner we take actions, as you mentioned, Board President Kneifel, the less drastic they will need to be. Due to our uniqueness of being a state agency that provides those specialized educational services and programs, as mentioned, we are seeking clarification on a few items and have indicated that we will seek an exemption from the state if and when necessary. There is a lot of uncertainty, and it is unclear at this time how strict the headcount cap and compensation administration measures will be. However, we are committed to minimizing the direct impact on our students and staff. At this time, there's no additional information to provide. I felt like that was quite a mouthful, but it was a lot of information to definitely share with the agency and the board. I'm open to answer any additional questions at this time.
Does anyone have any questions for Assistant Superintendent Cooper? Right, thank you. Moving on to 2.01, the approval of the consent agenda consistent with board policy to include items 3.01, 5.01, 6.01, 6.02, 6.03, 6.04, 7.02, 7.03, and 7.04.
Ms. okay? Can you hear me? I'd like to pull 6.02 and 6.03.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items minus 6.02 and 6.03?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor to approve consent agenda items 3.01, 5.01, 6.01, 6.04, 7.02, 7.03, and 7.04. Say aye.
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 Any opposition? Seeing none, those pass. So I need to do 3 and 4. Right. 2 and 3.
I think Michael Gordon said aye. I don't know if anyone else heard.
I did. 2 and 3. Okay, I just want this so I don't forget. Okay. Then we are moving on to agenda item 4.01, the finance report. Kim Bittrich, Director.
Good afternoon, Board President Kneifel, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendent Cooper, Assistant Superintendent Tachchoff, members of the board, and ASDB community. You have been provided our most recent board report that covers the financial data for March 2023 and 2024. Also included are the March financial statements for 2023 and 2024. This data was covered in our most recent Finance Committee meeting held last Thursday, May 2nd, with Board Member Gordon. Also in attendance were Superintendent Reichman and Assistant Superintendent Cooper. The total student count provided in the in the board report for April 1st, 2024 is the summarized total. We are analyzing the data from the student information system. This includes finding missing data on the student records and validating everything. The current data shows 2,010 students as of April 1st, 2024, compared to 2,146 students as of April 1st, 2023. A total decrease of 136 students. The locations where the student count has decreased are PDSD by 30, regional cooperatives by 56, preschool by 40, and birth to 3 by 15 students. At PDSD, at least 12 students moved out of state and at least 6 students left for mainstream school. In the regions, some of the Region 2 students are being serviced by Region 3, and some of the students have relocated to districts that do not use our services. And the teacher shortage has impacted the number of students that we can provide services to. As of April 1st, we had about 507 FTE, which includes 8.5 FTE at Foundation for Blind Children. At that time, we employed 725 staff. Only 152 are full-time, 12-month staff. There were currently 182 vacancies across the agency that we are actively recruiting for. The highlights of the March 2024 financial report shows the total revenue of $41.1 million was $1.2 million lower than the March 2023 revenue of $42.3 million. The major difference is a decrease in receipts from the institutional voucher and the fee-for-service revenue. These are tied to the student count. The fee-for-service billing is dependent on the data from the student information system. This is offset by an increase in the spending from the general fund. The budget fiscal year 2023 obligated expenditures of $46 million were $2.2 million less than budget fiscal year 2024 obligated expenditures of $48.2 million. The increase is in payroll of $1.2 million due to the salary adjustments for minimum wage, professional and outside services increase of $1.2 million due to the contracted nurses, related services staff, and contracted transportation services. Travel increase of $165,000 is an increase in student travel and professional development for staff. These are offset by a reduction in transfers out that were transferred last year of $770,000 to ADOA for security upgrades at PDSD and food service equipment at both campuses. The financial statements reflect the fiscal year data and not the budget fiscal year data. Fiscal year 24 obligations have exceeded the revenue by $2.5 million, and we had to use existing cash balances to meet those obligations. Our ending cash balance is $1 million less than it was at this time last year. The reductions are in federal grants of $430,000, the institutional voucher fund of $393,000, the classroom site fund of $603,000, and the increase in the cooperative service fund of $300,000. This concludes my report, and if there are any questions, I'm here to answer.
Thank you, Kim. Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, agenda item 5.02, information and possible action item, approval of master facility plan. Albert Duff, Director of Operations.
Thank you, President Kneifel, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendent Cooper, Assistant Superintendent Katchoff. I would like to spend a little time today. I'll lift this up so I can be heard a little more clearly. I've also been told I need to slow my roll with speaking a few times, so I will do my best, Sue K, with that as well. So before you today is about 2 years worth of work. We started this process, and I think we went over that in the work study session, the fact that we started the master facility plan back in October of 2022. That process also had an aspect from the Auditor General as a requirement to align our current facilities with Arizona Administrative Code in order to better utilize the square footage that we had. There was a lot of process that I think we went over in the work study session to get to this point, and some options that have been presented to the board for your discussion. The main point of today in this moment is for you to give me a directive of how I'm going to move forward with requesting capital funding. We don't have the level of funding needed internally to fund these projects ourselves, so we have to go out to others, and so therefore I have to have that information from you of how you would like us to proceed. I would like to notate that this discussion and action item, I'm going to start with the Phoenix campus, which is when we looked at the Phoenix campus, the square footage, student population, enrollment and demographics have resulted in us seeing that the size of the facility is acceptable and works for what our needs are. But the overall condition, design, and utilization of the facility needs a lot of work. Therefore, what was presented forward at the work study session was that we would actually utilize our architecture and engineering firm, which is LEA Architecture, to design, and as you have forward in the board docs, what is intended for each building, how we would renovate it, and the overall aspect of its future use. The total cost of that was just, I think, right around $38 million to complete that, maybe a little more off the top of my head. That is a rough order of magnitude, so that's a rough estimate to do all of that work as a phased approach over 10 years. So it's a long time. It's very, very tricky as we have to pull students out of a building for 6 months to a year and then move them back in after that renovation is done. Any of you have worked in schools have seen what we all love to see of those portable classrooms that show up every so often. That's what that would look like for this process. With this discussion item, the board can obviously give direction to move forward with this process for us to renovate and keep Phoenix campus essentially the same as it is today and provide great educational opportunities for our students there with what we have. One of the big notations I would like to notate is the fact that we would be demolishing the M and TCTC building. We would demolish those in order to build a new Birth to 5 center, as we have seen an increase in enrollment through Birth to 5, as well as a huge benefit to the operational aspect of having our preschool teachers and our Birth to 5 teachers all in one area, so that way that continuum of services provides the best service for the most crucial time of language acquisition. And so that was the intent there for Phoenix. Tucson campus is a little more tricky. Tucson campus, as notated in previous work study sessions, is 346,000 square feet, built over 30 different structures on 40 plus acres of land that was designed to house well more than 350 students. In 1980, it had that. So whenever they built the buildings in 1990, from the information they had, they built it correctly. But times have changed, as well as some of the legal aspects that have for enrollment. So therefore, our enrollment on the Tucson campus has now gone down to right around 150 students. Through the projections and seeing what we have in front of us, we're seeing enrollment stay stable between right around 110 to 150. So therefore, we wanted to decrease that campus down to meet the Arizona Administrative Code of approximately 180,000 square feet. When we started that process, we found that we could renovate certain buildings, which is presented to you as option 1. We went through that process and started to really look at the condition and age of the buildings, as well as some unique design aspects of those buildings that would be challenging to renovate, and it was determined to create an option 2. This was outside of the scope. LEA, being wonderful partners, did option 2, essentially pro bono for us, which wonderful of them, and I really appreciate that. And option 2 would give us the aspect of just building a whole new pre-K through 12th grade building on a vacant piece of land on the campus that's currently there. As a point to bring out with those 2 items with regards to cost and timeline, option 1 of renovating the buildings that are listed would take approximately 10 years. It would result in over $42 million of cost with an additional $2.7 million in landscape upgrades. Option 2 would take approximately 2 to 3 years to complete, require no movement of students out of their current buildings, and cost $4 million less. The reason it's less is because of the inflationary costs of doing a phased construction approach year over year for 10 years. In the work study session, it was mentioned, could we do an option 2 for Phoenix as well? I contacted LEA Architecture. They gave us one free pro bono, and so they did that for us, but unfortunately, we would have to write another scope of work and go ahead and proceed forward with that. I don't have a price point yet for that, but there is an opportunity to do a similar option 2 for the Phoenix campus. I don't know at this time if it would be as fiscally beneficial or timeline beneficial as option 2 is that we see for the Tucson campus, but there is an opportunity to do that, and we could do that potentially next fiscal year. I know that there's a lot of information on the website with regards to the PDF files. I know PDFs are not the most accessible format, especially for our blind and visually impaired community, and I apologize about that. We do have some Braille versions that if there's more concerns that we will go through. Those were presented at the open houses, and we did have that in Braille for our blind and VI community. There's been a lot of stakeholder engagement, just want to notate that as well, and there will be continued stakeholder engagement. We have essentially tiers on our stakeholders. We have identified them from the beginning of the process of 1, 2, and 3, not necessarily of importance, just their role and their capacity. Regardless of what direction is given, we would utilize the additional tier groups, specializations from individuals such as teachers of the deaf, teachers of the blind, students, alumni. As we move forward with either option, there will be a lot more stakeholder engagement more and more down that process as we look at individuals of what is needed in each building and each classroom. I could take up all day going over all of this, but I would like to open it up for more questions or comments from the board.
I will open it up to questions from the board. I do. You guys are going to be like, shut up, Suke. So my first question is, if for Tucson campus, if we went with option 2, what would happen to the, once we moved into the new building, what would happen to the old buildings and how much would that cost?
So that, as far as anything with regards to surplus land or buildings after the fact, is not part of this discussion or action item.
Okay.
That would be a future discussion and action item.
Okay. Then you answered my second question as well. My third question would be, if we, to move forward with an action item, could we do something like make a motion to move to approve of the master facility plan, but give some leeway to allow for development of an option 2 with the Phoenix campus?
Absolutely.
Okay. And do you want a definitive of option 1 or 2 for Tucson?
I would appreciate that in order for
Okay.
us to meet our Auditor General's aspect, because we need to have the master facility plan completed by June 30th. If there was a directive for the Phoenix campus to develop an option 2, we could still develop the master facility plan to meet our timeline and then add that in as an addendum. If I may, I would like to also go back to the previous question. I know on the documents it says parcel for sale. That is not determined yet. And I want to be very clear. It would be up to the board at a different date to either sell, transfer, or lease that area out or do nothing. But that is obviously something that when we maintain control of it, we are still responsible to maintain it. And part of the auditor findings is that we have to have capital planning to maintain any buildings that are on our inventory list. So there will be a push to figure out what we would do with those surplus buildings and land once the projects are completed.
I have one follow-up. I understand that in either of the Tucson options, the Burger Auditorium would be part of that. Would that be then renovated?
Yes, we would intend to do that. That might be a combination of funds, especially considering it gets rented out, so there's enterprise funds that can help with that. It is also a newer building, so it wasn't on the initial list. We would also maintain the superintendent's home, and which is now ASDB Museum, as well as the historic aspects, yes.
Awesome. Then you answered my follow-up, so awesome. Okay, I will entertain a motion. Linda, you have a question?
This is Linda. Yes, this is Linda Vogt speaking. I may have missed something. I did actually miss that work study session. Unfortunately, I was out of town. So I was debating whether or not I should jump in or not. But out of curiosity, if at some point down the road there is an issue with funding, will we be forced into a situation where we may have to sell that unused land or that parcel from the perspective of the state? If they look at it and say, you have this land, we expect you to sell it to you and use that revenue. Or do you have any thoughts or concerns about that? What is your sense of that, Albert?
That's a good question. As far as being forced, and this may be a question for our Attorney General team over there, as I don't know how that would work. But I do know that ADOA, as well as the state legislature, looks to be able to have this be as cost neutral as possible. So when we look at the level of deferred maintenance of the old buildings, as well as the value of the land, if the savings from not doing the deferred maintenance, plus the potential income from the sale or transfer or lease of that land, meets or exceeds the cost of the new construction, then it becomes very easy for the legislature to go move forward. It's actually going to save us money. So could they put pressure? I would say that there's always going to be pressure, as we are in right now, from the state to do what is fiscally best for the taxpayers, but maintain what we have to do as an agency. What I would like to notate, and it's something I did also say to Superintendent Reichman, and I know we have a lot of members that are watching from the alumni, which is no matter what, we have to honor our history without sacrificing our future. ASDB has done this before, and we can maintain our history regardless of the option, but it is a matter of putting effort and a conscious decision to honor that history and where we came from.
This is Linda. Interesting you say that, speaking of honoring and valuing our history. I do serve on the board of another school for the deaf. It is half private, half state. And they've had the same issues come up where they have a parcel remaining. And it is a very prominent area. And when we got into that financial difficulty, they were pushed to sell. And so I was wondering if that would be something that ASDB would be encouraged to do. Of course, being this other school is half private, half state, it's a little bit unique. But having schools for the deaf, both here and in other states, owning large parcels of land that we highly value, we want to preserve them for future buildings or for future projects. It's a very difficult position to be in, and I do understand the difficulty of that, which is why I wanted to ask what we were looking at here in Arizona. if we may be in that position. So yeah, I just wanted to share with the board as well that we're not alone in this. There are other deaf schools facing the same kinds of decisions.
That's correct. We're seeing that in many other areas, and I appreciate that, Linda, as well. I would also like to notate that the museum is a historical building due to the great work of Polly Brady Garcia and so many others. So the push to try and to get rid of that would be much more difficult. So we have some great legal protection for some of our most historic and cherished areas.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah.
Okay.
Albert, okay, just to be clear, my understanding is we need to have a master plan to the state by June 30, correct?
That is correct.
Now, this master plan, if we were to approve whatever tonight, then we'd be good for that. And if there were changes, things come up budgetarily, plans, then this isn't set in stone, never to be changed, correct?
Quite the opposite. The intent of this document is to be a living document, and that's part of the Auditor
Right.
General's finding that we had to make changes to policy, and we already did that. And so we have our capital review committee that every 6 months we review this information based off of demographics, legal aspects, best education practices, and would change it as needed based off of that. So it is the opposite. It is not meant to be fixed.
Right. That's the point I wanted to kind of bring up and make clear that, you know, we need this plan. And we can always adjust it as we go.
Yes, and also, you know, what you have in front of you is just the conceptual designs.
Yeah.
The full plan, and I have LEA behind me, but we were trying to work through it, and it's right around 200 pages total. So there's a lot more information in there about history and everything else. It's a very comprehensive document, but what you have in front of you is the main goal.
Okay. So do we need to, like,
Or Tucson, we have to make a decision
Yeah.
which one.
so should we do that first and then?
Yeah,
do it
why
as a
don't we do that?
package?
Yep. So I think Lynn makes a very good point here. I'd like to maybe put a motion on the table, or have someone put a motion on the table of which option to move forward for the Tucson campus and vote on that, and then vote on the entire piece together.
I move to put forward option 2 for the Tucson campus.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
All those in favor for option 2 for the Tucson campus, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Option 2 passes. So now I would also like us to consider for Phoenix to move forward with the proposal as is, while also investigating the option of a option 2 for Phoenix, for lack of a better term, and approve moving forward with option 2 in Tucson. So do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, this is Mike. Can I ask a question just before you proceed?
Absolutely, Mike, go right ahead.
I don't understand why we would vote to accept option 1 for Phoenix when we really don't have the information for option 2, which sounds like it really might be the way we want to proceed.
Mike, I don't think
Because
the
it
idea
seems-
is to move forward with option 1 on Phoenix. The idea is to move forward with option 1 in the master facility plan until we have the information for option 2 so that we can make a decision between the two. There's a due date on the master facility plan. Albert, if you want to speak to that.
Yes, Board
I'm
Member.
sorry, Evan, I think you've probably already addressed it. It just, to me, it seems to approve option 1 and proceed with the fulfillment of that while we're really waiting for the opportunity for option 2 to be developed.
If
Seems a little out of sequence.
If I may, and I agree, it is a little out of sequence. We would have loved to have more time. What I would notate, Mr. Gordon, is that, and maybe it's the verbiage that we need to get hammered down here, is that, if I may present a motion in that sense, is a motion to approve the current option pending further review of the development of option 2 in order to meet the deadline of the Auditor General's requirements. Therefore, it is clear that I have to come back with an option 2 prior to moving forward with any actual construction on any one of those sites.
This is Linda Bove. I have a question, if I may. I had the same hesitation as you, Mr. Gordon. It's the what if scenarios that we're looking at here, which are always difficult. Have we discussed these things with our Attorney General for the school or the agency? Have we checked if it's okay? Is that a motion that we can make? Is that a vote that we can take? I guess I'm looking for legal advice in terms of are we able to do this, to say, yes, we'll go forward with option 1 pending a potential option 2 that we don't actually have. Is that okay for us to do?
Right. So this is, Katie, you're asking if we have asked for approval from our Attorney General.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering if there's like a legal impact of this. Is that an okay motion for us to make? I'm looking over there. I think there's an attorney.
So I think the question is at hand is, can we make a motion to approve current option for the Phoenix campus pending development of a second option to meet the deadline for the strategic plan submission, with the understanding that once that second option, we would then discuss and then make a motion to decide which option we would go for with the Phoenix campus.
Just want to make sure we're covering all bases. This is Linda.
Good afternoon. This is Deborah Sterling. I'm an Assistant Attorney General, and I work with the ASDB on many of their issues.
Can you get a little closer to the mic?
Sure.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Much better. Yes.
First thing I have to clarify is I normally do not give legal advice in public open session. I need your permission to do that. You need to.
You have my permission to do.
I need the board's permission.
Okay. So
just make a simple motion.
I move that we allow Deb to give us advice on this motion process. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Bove, I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In favor?
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I mean, I'm asking that because it's a fairly straightforward issue.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of familiar with the master plan. I've seen it and I've talked with the staff about some parts of it. Certainly at the board level here, you can make a motion directing staff to move forward as best as corrected. And if any issues come up, then the staff can come back to you and they can report it and get additional advice.
Okay.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I don't know if we moved the camera.
So I don't know that we have an official motion on the floor or if we need to amend the current motion.
Just review one. Ask for anyone.
But I am open to a motion on. Yeah, if you can read them.
Yeah.
Good luck.
I move that we approve the current option for the PDSD campus, pending the development of an option 2 at a future time, to do this in order to meet our deadline for the master facility plan to the state.
I second. It's Linda Bove.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Hearing none, motion carries. Okay.
Break.
Yes, it is. We are at about 90 minutes, so we are going to take a 10-minute break here, and we will resume at, let's just say, 5:40. It's like,
That was 10 minutes.
Am I live? Can you hear me? Are we good? I think we're missing one board person still. Katie.
Media, are you all set?
1 minute. There she comes. Yeah, we're waiting, Katie. I'm just waiting on Katie. Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and resume with 6.02, intent to offer fiscal year 2025 employment contract to Orrin Ketchoff, interim assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction. Do I have, oh, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to remind you all that he requested this discussion to be open.
Okay.
This is Lynn. I pulled both 602 and 6.03, not because of the people, not because of Orrin, not because of Rosie. I think they're both very fine, qualified people for the positions. My concern is more adding another upper level administrative position, especially under the budgetary terms right now and the head cap. And I know we have some vacancies, but I just feel we're so top heavy, I hesitate to add yet another administrative position. And that's the reason I pulled them.
So do I have any comments or questions or any response from staff?
Yes, this is Earl Terry. One moment, please. I did take a couple of notes. I had a question about 6.03. Annette, excuse me one sec. Annette proposed a new position for the deputy assistant superintendent, and I just wanted to make sure that I'm clear. There were 24 applicants or so that NEV got for us, and we whittled that down to 5. And the one got the top score. We are offering her this new position, but I'm wondering if you could offer clarification on why we're not offering her the assistant superintendent position and whether you're going to be conducting a brand new search for that position.
Exactly.
That's 6.03, and that is specific to Rosie. So I don't think we can have that discussion right now.
Correct. We're currently on 6.02, so if we can keep the conversation to 6.02, and then we'll move down to 6.03 after we decide what we're going to do with 6.02. So
Sorry about that.
So we can have a discussion, you can ask questions, or I can entertain a motion on this.
I make a motion to, oh.
Yeah, sorry, and if this breaks the orders of the board, I apologize. Understanding what I just heard, I am fine with changing my mind, so you guys can discuss the two positions in executive session. I don't know if
They're
I can do
two
that.
different agenda items. We have to do them separately.
Okay.
I mean, we could go into executive session to discuss them both, so that's an option as well.
If anybody wanted that option, I can change my mind and
Gotcha.
provide that option.
Understood.
I'm going to make a motion on 6.02 to offer employment contract to Orrin Ketchoff for interim assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Linda Bove, I second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Motion carries. Moving on to 6.03. Annette, if you would like to address Board Member Terry's question for 6.03, or we can also, again, we can move to go into executive session to discuss this if we need legal advice specifically to that person. But if you are just wondering about the position in general, Annette, you might be able to field that question.
That question of why we didn't offer the assistant superintendent position to any of those 5 candidates is because none of them had assistant managerial experience. What we look at other deaf schools, blind schools, most of them are smaller schools. They have a smaller number of teachers, a smaller number of professional staff. And when we look at Assistant Superintendent Oren Catchoff responsibilities, he has 400 professional staff underneath him, 220 teachers in that professional staff. It is a large group of staff, and it's a large agency. He has responsibilities not only of 2 campuses, but also for the itinerant services and for the early learning programs. You just heard him say most of the time or attention is on the campuses, and it hasn't been able to provide the kind of guidance and support that he wants to provide for ELP program and the itinerant program for our births to 3 and 3 to 5. Our itinerant services are more than half of our students. Unfortunately, we have a great leader, and those people here have been here for a while. So it's really looking at those five candidates' experience and their skills. One was the preferred choice with the highest score. But looking at the experience and the responsibilities for the job, they did not align. I could not offer that position to that person for assistant superintendent. I just couldn't do that. And several people asked me to do that. And as I looked at the experience, the qualifications, it was a wonderful candidate, but it didn't have that assistant managerial experience. None of them had that. So what's the solution? We have already discussed with our leadership people, and I just discussed with you all about our leaderships and how do we provide them with professional development that gives them that managerial skills experience. And then looking at that candidate that is preferred from the interview panel, what do we do and how do we bring them to the agency?
I'm sorry, hang on a second. What is happening right now? We're getting a little bit lost and distracted by someone walking onto stage, and this isn't necessarily the right time or place. Can you share with us what is going on, please?
My apologies. I merely wanted to make sure that the board understood. I work for the Attorney General's office. My name is Michelle Kritzman. I'm one of the Assistant Attorney Generals in the employment arena. And I just wanted to make sure that the discussion about this item did not cross the line into discussing the actual person, because that person had asked to have that information be discussed in executive session. So I apologize for the way I came up here.
That's okay.
I'm not present in front of all of you very often, so I just wanted to make that comment.
So I would say if we want to discuss this further as to why that person was not offered the assistant superintendent position and yet another position, we would move this into executive session, and I would need a motion for that.
This is Linda. I move that we go into executive session. You did need a motion for executive session, so moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
Aye.
So we need to read the executive session information. It's all over the place.
Where do we need to go?
It's usually here.
Oh, it's this one right here.
Yeah.
This one.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Don't we read that in executive session?
It's usually here.
This is just the minutes, same thing. Yeah, I should have it.
Here. She's checking it. I think you can read it. You might be able to read just this. Pursuant to ARS, the board may vote to go into executive session. Just that piece. The pursuant to.
Okay. So pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A1, the board may vote to go into executive session for the purposes of discussion and consideration of employment matters.
Since we've already passed that motion, we are going to go into an executive session, so there'll be a short break.
Anyone outside? We're coming back to get ready to start. Okay, thank you. I'm just waiting for Suke.
Okay. All right, welcome back. Thank you for your patience, everyone. We are on 6.03, and we can entertain a motion.
This is Linda. This is Linda. I would like to make a motion that we approve the offer of employment to Rosie De La Cruz as Deputy Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction. Is that good enough language, Suke?
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
This is Katie. I second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
I think the motion passes. Thank you. I got to go back to my notes. Now we move on to 7.01, information and discussion item. Right? Yeah. Okay, introduction and possible discussion of policies, BGE, EBAA, ECB, JH, JHD, and KEC. Maria Murphy, Director of Policy and Government Relations.
Good evening, Madam President, Madam Secretary, members of the board, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendents, ASDB community and staff. You have before you the red line policies that are being presented. No public comment was received. These are all in response to Arizona School Board Association advisories, and I have made those updates with the review of our internal subject matter experts.
And this is first read, so we will be voting on this at the next board meeting, correct?
That is correct, ma'am.
Did anyone have any questions? All right, thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to agenda item 801, call to the public for non-agenda items.
I have 2 calls to the public on non-agendized items. The first one will go with Polly Garcia.
Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Board President, members of the board, superintendent and administrators, community and friends. First of all, I will briefly mention the master facility plans that have been proposed. To be honest, I'm not very comfortable. I don't necessarily like Plan A or B for Tucson campus. Because I know too much about the problems there, I think that the architecture has painted a picture to make it look good that I don't fully trust. But anyway, I actually wanted to make a comment about the history and the Chamber of Commerce, some comments that have come up about ASDB, and I will try to keep it brief. There's another story that I would love to share, but I'm going to have to save that for another day. There's an interesting one about milk and eggs, but we'll talk about that later. I've worked at ASDB as the curator, and I've done a lot of historical research as well. I found a very interesting story about the Chamber of Commerce. In 1914, and excuse me, I need to use different glasses, just one moment, please. In 1914, a question came up. The question was regarding a state school for the deaf and blind, and that question came to the legislature. It was to consider a permanent place for ASDB. Tucson could not afford to lose the ASDB campus. It was near the University of Arizona, on Park Avenue and 2nd Street. The secretary at the time was hearing and emphasized to the legislature in Tucson that the issue had been brought to them and he said we have to take quick action in order to prevent other people from taking over ASDB and trying to relocate it to somewhere else like Phoenix. One member of the Chamber of Commerce and a Tucson legislator said that Tucson was the natural home for the deaf and blind children. And that land was intended to be permanent, and their place, their home, was to be permanently in that area where ASDB now is. In 1917, another legislator decided to propose having a school for the deaf and blind. Excuse me, this microphone isn't necessary for me. And so they said, if you're going to do this school for the deaf and blind thing, you need to do it quickly. The purpose of creating that land and making that home in Tucson was intentional, and everybody worked together. They called for support for reinforcements. And the Chamber of Commerce advised the Tucson legislator to go up to Phoenix and tell them that this is ours and we will give money funding for the School for the Deaf and Blind for it to stay in Tucson. Give 40 acres, and rather than 40 acres, they actually gave 50 acres. And then in 1918, the land became permanently assigned to ASDB, and it found its home on West Speedway. In 2015, I went to Phoenix to see the legislature, and I proposed that ASDB become a historical site, our Tucson campus, and that easily passed with a unanimous vote. I am proud to see that we have the blue marker as a historical site. And that is the reason that when I see that word permanent, it is important that we keep that in mind. Tucson said that that land is the natural home for deaf and blind children. That land on West Speedway should stay as it is. And that is what I feel truly strongly about. The school should remain as it is. We bought 50 acres. We had 50 acres for this school, and now we're down to 40, but that is our history. Those 40 acres are our history. Thank you. Oh, and before that, I also had a thought. I was listening about plans for the future expansion of the school, and we do need to think about the school as well and do something about that, about those numbers.
Thank you.
Our last comment will be from Beverly Hawkins.
Hello, board and school administrators. My name is Beverly Hawkins. I will try to keep it brief. I'm a graduate of ASDB, and I highly value keeping the school as it is. I know that the legislator has said that we have to cut our budget, and we are looking at unused buildings and things like that, and trying to make our budget reasonable, perhaps change those buildings and change the landscape. But ultimately, what we should be focusing on is student need. Give the students a place to recreate outside, do something good with it. As far as plans A and B, I feel like we're confining our students to a smaller part of campus. There are generally separate dorms for girls and boys at other schools across the country. If everything is too close together, boys and girls are going to find a way to have sex in the dorms. So those Apache and those dorms need to be separated to keep boys and girls separate. Middle school and high school, those buildings were just built in, I think, the 90s. They need to stay the way that they are. Some of the other buildings could be changed to parks or changed to landscaping or something like that to more reasonably use the money. So those are my suggestions, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. Before we move on to 8.02, I think Linda wanted to mention something.
Oh, yes. Oh. This is Linda. I'm so sorry. I was in the middle of a coughing fit. I'm having some allergies up here. I wanted to make an announcement for those who may not be aware. The Clean Election Committee has partnered with ACDHH to develop a voter education guide and translate that into ASL. And it is ready to go, or will be ready to go for the primary. Over the next few days, in this week, deaf interpreters will be working very, very hard to develop those videos. And I thought this would be a great way, a great tool to use for our students, as well as deaf adults, to get a better idea of what voting looks like, so that our deaf students can understand their civic duty a little bit better and understand what the voting process looks like. Let's start them young. So I wanted to make sure everyone is aware of that. We will do that for the 2024 election. There will be more ASL videos coming out for the general election at the end of August as well. So please bear that in mind.
All right, moving on to 8.02, discussion item, agenda items for the next regular board meeting scheduled for July 11th, 2024 in Tucson. This is not specific for the next board meeting, but I would like to direct ASDB staff to work with the ASDB EA. Did I say that right? Okay. We had talked about using the ombudsman and resources to pull potential eligible members for the EA on their interest and involvement in developing an H policy. So I would like to direct staff to move forward with that, so that we could possibly have a discussion for another work study session to discuss the results of that poll, let's say.
Does it still have the question about using agency resources to the board public resources for private organizations private organization activities?
So I thought we, right, but I thought we were discussing having the ombudsman actually conduct the poll.
The ombudsman person's time spent from ASDB
Do we
and
still
their
have our
time that
AG?
is spent for paid for by the agency.
All right, I will follow up with Annette on this and the AG, because they have left for the evening, to see if we can go ahead with that for the, she's still here? Huh? Oh, I'm not seeing her. Hi, Deb. There you are. Okay. Can you answer that question for us? Can you answer that question? The table's right in my way. Oh, there's Michelle too. Yes. Sorry.
Oh, it hasn't, I guess it moves a little bit. Good afternoon, good evening, I guess. I'm Deborah Sterling, Assistant AG. Again, if you want me to provide legal advice, you have to give me permission, as benign as it may be, to give it in the public session.
I move that we allow Deb to provide us some legal expertise on this subject. I have a
Linda, I
second. All
second.
those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Awesome.
Okay. I think if I heard correctly, the question is the use of state resources in order to work with potential education associations.
So what we're trying, from our last work study, we decided we would like to get a sort of the pulse of potential membership for the Educational Association. Right now, it's very, very small. And we'd kind of like to know the interest of staff that would be eligible to participate prior to developing a policy. Can we use state resources to poll staff to do that?
I apologize, I don't know the answer off the top of my head.
Okay.
But what I can do is I could review the law, which there isn't a whole lot on, but I do know other, like, school districts that have done this, and I can certainly talk to their attorneys and find out how that was done, because they would be essentially using public resources from their district. So I'd be glad to do that, and if you let me know.
That would be awesome if you could email Annette and I so that we could either move forward or think of another plan of action if we need it.
I'd be glad to.
Awesome.
Anything else I can help you with?
Not at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any other items for the next agenda? You can always contact myself or Annette. All right. Moving down to 9.01.
This one's mine. But before I move to adjourn, this is Teacher Appreciation Week, and I want to express my appreciation for all the teachers, staff, nurses. Keep on keeping on. And now, I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned at 6:56 p.m. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, ASDB community.